The Hells Angels biker saw the little girl cornered in his rented room, and his fury tore through the night like fire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get to the story. In a small, quiet town on the outskirts of the city, where everyone knew each other's name and the nights were peaceful, there was a rented room that hid a dark secret. The room, dimly lit with only a single lamp flickering on a bedside table, had become the unexpected setting for a terrifying encounter. A man, known only by his Hells Angels patch, had rented this place for just a few days. He wasn't there for pleasure. He needed a break, some peace away from the chaos of his life on the road. His motorcycle, a gleaming Harley-Davidson, sat parked outside in the dark, its chrome reflecting the pale moonlight. Inside, things were far from calm. He had barely sat down when a sound, a weak, desperate cry, reached his ears. He froze for a moment, his instincts kicking in. It wasn't a noise anyone would normally hear in a place like this. His sharp eyes darted around the room, but there was nothing unusual. Until, from the corner of the room, he saw her. A little girl, no older than 10, her body trembling with fear, backed into the corner. Her eyes were wide with terror, and she looked as if she was trapped. His jaw clenched. The room was small, but her presence in it, in this situation, was anything but innocent. His heart raced as his hand instinctively reached for the handle of the knife he always carried, but something in him hesitated. No one in his life had ever caused him to pause before acting. But this wasn't just any situation. The little girl's eyes locked onto his, full of confusion and panic, and he could see her lips quivering as she tried to say something, but the words didn't come out. His gaze hardened. She was cornered by someone, and it was his job to make sure no one else would get hurt. With a calm but determined movement, he stepped forward, his heavy boots thudding against the floor. His voice was gruff, cutting through the tension. It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help. But the girl didn't trust him. She thought he was just another threat, another bad man who would hurt her. The biker lowered his voice even further, trying to ease her fear. You're safe now. But even his soothing words didn't calm her. He stepped closer, still cautious, still trying to reassure her. But as he did, his past began to flash before his eyes. He'd seen things, done things, and lived a life that had forced him to become someone who relied on fear and anger to survive. He wasn't proud of it, but he wasn't sorry either. But here, in this moment, with this little girl, it all felt different. The guilt from his past, his failure to protect others, hung heavily on him. He couldn't let the same thing happen again. Not to her. Not to anyone. The air in the room grew thick with tension as he extended his hand, slowly, carefully, so as not to startle her. The girl looked at it, then back at him, her fear palpable. And then, as if something inside her finally broke, she hesitantly reached out, her small, trembling hand brushing against his. It was enough. For the first time in a long while, the biker felt like he could do something right. The moment the girl touched him, he knew he couldn't walk away. He had to protect her. He had to make sure she would never face fear like that again. The biker lifted her gently in his arms and turned toward the door. The room felt colder now, emptier, but in his mind, he could already feel the fury rising inside him. Whoever had done this to her, whoever had trapped her here, would pay. This wasn't just about saving her, it was about redemption. And he wasn't going to let anyone get away with it. I walked quickly down the dark hallway, the weight of the girl still in my arms, her small body trembling slightly from the lingering fear, the cold, and everything else that had brought her here. I pushed open the door to the rented room and stepped inside, shutting the door softly behind me. The room was cramped and dimly lit, with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the floor. It smelled faintly of old carpet and stale air, but it was safe. For now, it would have to do. I gently set the girl down on the bed, keeping a hand on her shoulder for reassurance. Her wide eyes met mine, but she didn't speak. She was scared, and I could feel that. I had no idea what had happened to her, but I knew one thing. Whoever did this would regret it. I hadn't lived this long in this world without knowing how to make people pay for their actions. As I stepped back, I gave her a soft smile, trying to calm her, though deep down I wasn't sure who needed reassurance more, the girl or me. She hesitated for a moment, then finally whispered, "Who are you?" It was a question I wasn't prepared for. Who was I anymore? A man who wore the Hells Angels patch. A man who had seen the worst parts of the world. A man who had lost his way and found it again in the most unexpected of places. But this was different. I was no longer just the biker who lived for the ride. The man whose life had been consumed by rage and the need for revenge. I was now something else. I wasn't sure what yet, but I knew I had to protect this little girl. "I'm someone who's here to help you," I said, my voice gruff but steady. She didn't say anything else, just nodded slightly. She seemed to trust me, but I knew that trust wasn't something that came easy for someone her age. "Do you want some water?" I asked, walking over to the small table in the corner of the room. She didn't answer at first, but then slowly nodded, her gaze never leaving me. I grabbed a bottle from the nearby cooler and walked back to her. As I handed it to her, I noticed her hands were shaking. I tried to offer a reassuring smile, but inside, I was far from calm. My mind was racing. How had she ended up here? Who had hurt her and why? "You're safe now," I told her softly. She took a small sip of water, then set the bottle down beside her. Her eyes met mine again, and this time there was something more than fear. There was curiosity. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. It was a question I didn't know how to answer. I wasn't sure myself, but I knew it was because, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something right. "Because no one should be left to suffer," I replied. "No one should be trapped in a corner, feeling like they have nowhere to go." She nodded slowly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. But it was fleeting. The sound of a car door slamming outside the building snapped me back into reality. My instincts kicked in immediately. There was someone out there. Someone who didn't want her to get away. I walked quickly to the window and peeked through the blinds. My heart dropped as I saw a dark car parked across the street. Two figures emerged, moving with the kind of purpose that made my blood run cold. They were looking for her. I turned back to the girl, my expression hardening. "Stay here," I told her firmly. "Don't move, don't make a sound." "Understand." She nodded, fear returning to her face, but this time, there was something else in her eyes too, a determination. I couldn't let them get to her. Not after everything she'd been through. I grabbed my jacket from the chair and slipped my gloves on. There was no turning back now. Whoever these people were, they weren't going to hurt anyone else on my watch. I checked the small drawer next to the bed, pulling out a small pocket knife. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to make sure that when the time came, I could protect her. I moved quietly to the door, listening. The voices outside grew louder. They were getting closer. It was time to act. I opened the door slowly, taking one last glance back at the girl. She was watching me, her eyes wide but trusting. I gave her one last nod, then stepped into the hallway. I had no idea who these people were or what they wanted, but I was going to make sure they never got their hands on her again. I stepped out of the room quietly, keeping my senses sharp as I moved toward the door. The footsteps outside had stopped for a moment, and I could feel the tension thick in the air. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but there was no turning back now. Whoever these people were, they weren't getting past me. I had made that decision the moment I picked the girl up and promised to protect her. As I crept down the hallway, my mind raced. How had they found her? Who were they? My gut told me they weren't ordinary criminals. They were after something bigger. The voices outside were muffled but unmistakable, sharp and commanding. I could hear them clearly now, and one of them mentioned her name. My jaw tightened. They knew exactly who they were looking for. I reached the end of the hallway and pressed my back against the wall. The sound of a door creaking open made my blood run cold. Slowly, I peeked around the corner. There were two men, both wearing dark jackets, their faces hidden in shadow. One of them was speaking into a walkie-talkie, but I didn't need to hear the words to know they were here to cause trouble. They were trying to track her down, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I slipped back down the hall, moving with the kind of quiet that only comes from years of training. I had to get back to the room without them noticing, but time was running out. The girl was still inside, vulnerable. I had no idea what they would do if they found her, but I wasn't willing to let them find out. I reached the door to the room, my heart pounding in my chest. For a brief moment, I hesitated, wondering what the best move would be. But then I remembered the girl, her terrified eyes, the way she had clung to me without a second thought. I couldn't fail her. I turned the doorknob slowly, pushed it open just enough to slip inside. The girl was still sitting on the bed, her eyes wide as she watched me. I nodded to her, trying to give her some sense of reassurance, though deep down I was just as uncertain. She gave a small nod in return, her lips trembling. I didn't have much time. I moved quickly to the window, pulling back the blinds just enough to see what was going on outside. The two men were now standing just a few feet away from the building, their eyes scanning the area like predators hunting their prey. I could see one of them hold up a picture, her picture. My stomach dropped. They were getting closer. It was only a matter of time before they came inside. I turned to the girl. "Stay quiet, stay still," I whispered. She nodded again, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "I'm going to get you out of here," I told her, more to reassure myself than her. I quickly assessed the room. It wasn't much, just a bed, a small dresser, and a table in the corner, but it was enough for now. I could hear the men talking in hushed voices outside. They were getting impatient. I had to act fast. I moved to the door, checking the peephole to make sure the coast was clear. I needed to distract them, get them off her trail. The girl would be safe here for a few minutes, but I wasn't going to take any chances. I took a deep breath and reached for my jacket, pulling out a few things I'd need: my keys, my phone, and a couple of other tools. I glanced back at the girl one last time before slipping out of the room. I had a plan, but it was risky. I wasn't sure how long I would be able to keep the men distracted, but I wasn't going to let them harm her. I walked down the stairs to the parking lot, keeping low and out of sight. My heart was racing, and I could feel the familiar tension building up in my chest. This wasn't the kind of situation I was used to, but it didn't matter. I wasn't walking away. Not now. The moment I reached the back of the building, I quickly started my bike and revved the engine. The sound of the Harley roaring to life echoed through the quiet street, and I knew the men would hear it. The distraction was set. I gunned the engine, heading straight toward the main road, making sure to go slowly enough to draw their attention, but not fast enough to escape. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I turned back to glance at the building. The two men were already moving in my direction, their eyes fixed on the bike. I didn't know how much time I had, but I hoped it was enough. As I drove away, I glanced over my shoulder one last time, hoping that the girl was still safe, still hidden. I wasn't done yet. I had to keep her safe. I would stop at nothing to make sure of that. I sped down the road, the roar of the Harley's engine reverberating through the night, cutting through the quiet like a knife. My heart raced as I glanced in the rearview mirror, looking for any signs of pursuit. I knew I had drawn their attention, but I couldn't afford to let up. The girl was still back at the room, hidden and vulnerable, and I wasn't about to let anyone hurt her. The night was cold, the wind stinging my face as I accelerated, weaving between the occasional car that passed me by. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins, sharpening my focus. Every muscle in my body was tight, alert, ready for anything. As I neared the edge of town, I pulled off the main road and onto a smaller, quieter street. I had to lay low for a while, give the men time to regroup and think I was long gone. I pulled the bike into a dark alley, keeping the engine running just in case I needed to make a quick getaway. I leaned against the cold brick wall, my mind spinning. I didn't have a clear plan. I knew I needed to get back to the girl, but I also needed to know who was after her and why. There had to be something more going on here, something bigger than just a random attack. As I sat there, trying to catch my breath, I heard a voice behind me. It was low, gravelly, and filled with warning. "You think you can just take her and ride off into the night?" I didn't even flinch. I knew the voice. I knew the man who had spoken it. I slowly turned to face him, my fingers wrapping tighter around the handlebars of my bike. It was one of the men I had seen earlier, the one who had been scanning the street with the picture. His face was hard, like stone, his eyes cold as ice. He took a step toward me, his hands raised slightly, like he was ready to make a move. "You're in over your head, friend," he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen it all. I didn't speak at first. I just studied him, looking for any sign of weakness, any opportunity. "I don't know who you are or what you want with that girl," I finally said, my voice calm, steady. "But I'm not letting you take her. Not now. Not ever." The man smirked, a cold, humorless grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You think you can just play hero? You're nothing but a fool." You don't know what she's mixed up in. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. I wasn't a fool. I had seen enough in my life to know that there was always more to a story than it appeared on the surface. I don't care what she's mixed up in, I said, stepping forward, closing the gap between us. I care that she's a kid. She doesn't deserve this. The man took another step, his stance growing more aggressive. You have no idea what you're up against, he warned. You're not going to win this fight. Nobody ever does. I didn't respond right away. I knew he was right about one thing. This wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't about to back down. Not when it came to protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves. My mind raced, weighing my options. I could try to fight him here, but that would only put the girl in danger. I needed to outsmart him, find a way to get back to her without him getting in my way. I glanced down the alley, trying to come up with a plan. Then I saw it, the fire escape on the side of the building. A quick way up, a chance to get out of sight. I looked back at the man, my eyes narrowing. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice low. I'm not going to win this fight. But you're not going to either. Before he could react, I turned and ran toward the fire escape. I heard him curse behind me, his footsteps following fast. I didn't look back. I had no intention of stopping. I reached the ladder and pulled myself up quickly, my fingers gripping the cold metal. I could hear him getting closer, but I kept moving. My focus was on the top of the building, on the girl. I couldn't afford to lose her now. I reached the roof, pulling myself up with one last effort. I stood for a moment, catching my breath, listening. The man was still behind me, but he hadn't made it up yet. I quickly scanned the rooftops, looking for a way to cross without being seen. I couldn't waste any more time. I had to get back to the girl. I turned and sprinted across the roof, my boots thudding against the surface, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew the man was right behind me, but I wasn't going to stop. Not until I got her out of here. Not until she was safe. I ran across the rooftop, my boots pounding against the gravel and old shingles, trying to focus on getting as far away from the man as possible. I could hear him getting closer, the sound of his heavy footsteps echoing in the distance. I had to stay ahead of him. Every part of me screamed to keep moving faster, but I had to think clearly. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. The girl was counting on me, and I wasn't about to let her down. The rooftop seemed to stretch forever, but I knew I couldn't keep running like this for long. I needed to get back to the building on the other side of the street where the girl was waiting. But I couldn't go straight down. The alley was too exposed. I needed a plan. I stopped for a second, catching my breath and listening. His footsteps were closer now, but there was something else too, the faint sound of a car engine idling in the distance. I knew what that meant. The men were closing in. I looked around and saw the fire escape on the far side of the building. A way down, but it would take time. I cursed under my breath. There was no way I could make it down in time without getting caught. Then I saw something that might help. There was a narrow gap between two buildings, barely wide enough for a person to slip through. I could use that. It would give me some cover. I sprinted toward the gap, moving quickly but carefully, making sure not to make any noise. As I got closer, I could hear the sound of the car engine revving. They were getting ready to leave. I had to hurry. I reached the gap and slid through it, my heart pounding as I squeezed through the tight space. It was dark, and I couldn't see much, but I knew the girl was close. I had to get to her. I pulled myself through the other side, and for a moment, everything went still. The alley was quiet now. I could hear nothing but the sound of my breathing. I stepped carefully, making sure no one could see me. I kept to the shadows, moving slowly toward the building where the girl was waiting. I couldn't let my guard down yet. I had no idea where the men were or how close they were. I reached the door to the building and checked the lock. It was still secure. Good. I opened the door quietly and stepped inside, making sure to close it just as softly behind me. The building was old, with narrow hallways and peeling wallpaper, but it was a safe place for now. I walked quickly toward the back room, where I had left the girl. My heart beat louder in my chest with each step. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I had been gone longer than I had planned. What if the men had found her? What if they were waiting for me? I reached the door to the room and stopped, holding my breath. I listened for any sounds, any movement. But there was nothing. I slowly turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. The room was dark, but I could see her sitting on the bed, her back against the wall, her eyes wide and fearful. She looked up when she heard the door creak, and I saw a flash of relief cross her face when she saw me. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Are you okay? I asked softly, walking toward her. She nodded slowly, but I could see the fear still in her eyes. They came, didn't they? She whispered. I didn't answer right away. I just sat down beside her, my hand resting gently on her shoulder. They're not going to get you, I said, my voice firm. I won't let them. She looked at me, her eyes full of doubt and fear. How do you know? How can you stop them? I took a deep breath and turned toward the window. The night was still, but I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. I'm not sure yet, I said, my voice low. But I'm not going to stop until you're safe. I promise you that. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, but she nodded, a small spark of hope flickering behind the fear. I could see she was still scared, but I could also see that she was beginning to trust me. I had to keep that trust, no matter what. The sound of footsteps outside the door broke my thoughts. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Someone was out there. I motioned for the girl to stay quiet and moved toward the door. I could hear muffled voices and the unmistakable sound of footsteps getting closer. They were here. The men had found us. I turned to the girl, my face hardening. Stay here, I whispered. I'm going to handle this. She nodded, and I could see the fear in her eyes again. I walked toward the door, my hand reaching for the knife at my belt. I had to protect her. There was no other option. As I opened the door, I prepared myself for what was coming. I couldn't let them take her. Not now. Not ever. I opened the door slowly, my eyes scanning the hallway outside. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps, but they weren't close enough to be an immediate threat. I held my breath, listening. It was the moment of truth. I had no idea how many of them were out there or how far they were willing to go to get to the girl. I had to move fast, and I had to be quiet. I stepped into the hallway, closing the door softly behind me. The girl was safe for now, but I knew that wouldn't last long. My hand hovered over the handle of my knife, ready to react if necessary. The footsteps grew louder, and I realized they were approaching from both ends of the hallway. It was time to make my move. I took a deep breath and moved quickly, pressing my back against the wall, trying to stay out of sight. I moved toward the stairs, my heart pounding with every step. I couldn't afford to be seen. The last thing I needed was for one of them to spot me before I had a chance to get back to the girl. I reached the stairs and crouched down, making my way slowly and carefully to the bottom. The last thing I wanted was to make a noise that would give me away. I could see the shadows of the men moving near the top of the stairs. They were getting closer. I had no time to waste. As quietly as possible, I slipped into the small utility room at the bottom of the stairs, hiding behind a stack of old boxes. I waited, my breathing slow and steady, my body tense with anticipation. The footsteps grew louder, and I could hear the men talking to each other, their voices low but urgent. She has to be here somewhere, one of them muttered. Check every room. She's not getting away. My blood ran cold as I heard the words. They were looking for her, and if they found her, there was no telling what they would do. I knew I had to get back to her before they did. I waited until the men passed by, their footsteps fading into the distance. I took a deep breath, ready to make my move. I couldn't let them catch me. Not now. Not when I was so close. I stepped out of the utility room, moving quickly and silently. I had to make it back to the room where the girl was hiding. I moved through the building, taking every corner carefully, staying as far out of sight as possible. Every time I heard a footstep, I froze, holding my breath until the sound faded away. I couldn't afford to be careless. I reached the door to the room where the girl was, but I didn't open it immediately. I listened carefully, trying to gauge the distance between me and the men. The hallway was silent. I pushed the door open just a crack, peering inside. The girl was still sitting on the bed, her eyes wide with fear, but she hadn't moved. She looked up as I entered, and her face softened slightly when she saw me. They're gone, I whispered. She nodded, but I could see the fear still in her eyes. Are you okay? I asked, kneeling beside her. She looked at me for a long moment, and then nodded again. I'm scared, she whispered. I don't know what's going to happen. I reached out, resting a hand on her shoulder. You don't need to be scared, I said, my voice firm. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. She looked at me for a moment longer, as if trying to gauge whether she could trust me. I could see the doubt in her eyes, but I knew she was starting to believe me. I had to keep her safe. I couldn't let the people who were after her win. I stood up, taking a step back. We need to get out of here, I said. It's not safe anymore. The girl looked at me, a sense of urgency in her eyes. Where will we go? she asked, her voice trembling. I paused for a moment, thinking. We'll figure it out, I said. But first, we need to leave before they come back. I took her hand gently, helping her up from the bed. Stick close to me, I said. Stay quiet. Don't make a sound. I moved toward the door, peeking outside. The hallway was empty for now, but I knew that wouldn't last. Let's go, I said, my voice steady. We moved quickly and quietly down the hallway, staying in the shadows as much as possible. The tension in the air was thick, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Every step felt like it was bringing us closer to safety, but also closer to danger. We made our way through the building, avoiding the men who were still searching for her. Every time we heard a noise, I stopped, my body tensing, ready for whatever might come. But we kept moving, step by careful step. We reached the back door, and I carefully opened it, checking to make sure the coast was clear. I glanced back at the girl, and she nodded. We were almost there. Almost free. I pushed the door open slowly, making sure not to make a sound. The night air hit me like a wall as I stepped outside, the cold biting at my skin. I looked back at the girl, who was standing just behind me, her eyes filled with both fear and trust. She was still young, too young to be caught up in something like this, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of the promise I had made to her. I would keep her safe, no matter what. I motioned for her to follow me. Stay close, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rush of wind. She nodded, and we started moving. The street outside was quiet, the kind of eerie stillness that only comes when something dangerous is lurking nearby. I could feel it in my bones. I didn't know how long we had before the men came after us, but I wasn't about to wait and find out. We moved quickly, staying in the shadows, trying to avoid any lights. I didn't trust the quiet, but it was all we had for now. Every footstep echoed in the night, a constant reminder that danger was never far away. The girl's small hand was gripping mine tightly, her knuckles white. I squeezed her hand reassuringly, trying to convey that everything would be okay, though part of me wasn't sure. We made our way down the alley, ducking between two buildings and using every corner to our advantage. I kept my eyes peeled for movement, listening for the faintest sound. But all I could hear was the girl's breathing, soft and quick, and the pounding of my own heart. As we reached the end of the alley, I paused and looked around. The street was clear, but I wasn't about to take any chances. I could feel their presence, like a shadow hanging over us. I pulled the girl behind me and motioned for her to stay low. We crouched down beside a large dumpster, our breathing steady, waiting. The seconds felt like hours. It wasn't long before I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. I peeked around the corner, just enough to see a figure walking past. He was alone, scanning the area. The man was big, wearing a dark jacket and carrying something heavy in his hand. He looked like he had just finished searching the building we had escaped from. He was close, too close for comfort. My pulse quickened, and I knew I couldn't let him find us. I waited until he passed by, then motioned for the girl to stay where she was. Slowly, I moved out from behind the dumpster, keeping low to the ground. The man was moving away from us, his attention focused elsewhere. I glanced back at the girl, making sure she was still there, still safe. I knew I couldn't let my guard down. I couldn't afford to slip up now. I took a deep breath and followed the man at a distance, moving quickly but carefully. I had to make sure he didn't know we were there. We reached a quieter part of the street, and I knew we were running out of time. I needed to find a place where we could hide, somewhere they couldn't find us. I turned to the girl, my voice low but firm. We need to move fast. Stay with me, don't talk unless I say so, and keep your head down. She nodded, her eyes wide, but she was listening. We continued down the street, the cold wind biting at our faces. The buildings around us grew taller, more oppressive, and I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Every streetlight we passed felt like a beacon, shining down on us, but I knew we couldn't stop. The man was still out there, and I couldn't take the risk of him finding us. We reached a parking lot, deserted and dark, the perfect place to lay low for a while. I motioned for the girl to stay behind me as I moved toward a small shed at the far end of the lot. It was dark, but it offered some cover. I carefully opened the door, making sure it didn't creak, and we slipped inside. The inside was cold and smelled like old wood and rust, but it would have to do. I closed the door behind us, the faint sound of the wind outside the only thing we could hear now. We stay here for a bit, I whispered, my voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through me. Stay quiet. We can't afford to make a sound. The girl nodded, her small figure huddled close to me in the dark. I could feel her shivering, but I didn't know if it was from the cold or the fear. It didn't matter. I had to keep her safe. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. I had no idea how long. We'd have to stay here, but I knew it wouldn't be long before they were looking for us again. We weren't out of danger yet. As I looked down at the girl, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't there before. Hope. It was faint, almost like a flicker, but it was there. And that was all I needed to keep going. I wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. I sat in the dimly lit shed, my back pressed against the cold wall, listening for any sign of movement outside. The girl was still beside me, her small form huddled close to mine, trying to stay warm. Her breath came in shallow bursts, and I could feel her body trembling. The air in the shed was stale, filled with the smell of rust and dust, but it was better than being out in the open. We were safe for now. I glanced at her, my eyes softening as I saw the fear still lingering in her eyes. I could tell she was scared. I didn't know exactly what she had gone through, but I could see the trauma in the way she held herself, the way she looked over her shoulder every few seconds, as if expecting someone to appear out of nowhere. I wasn't sure how long we could stay in the shed, but we had to keep moving. They were still out there looking for her. I could feel it. The men wouldn't give up that easily. Hey, I said softly, trying to break the silence. I need you to stay strong, okay? We're not done yet. We're going to get through this. She nodded slowly, though I could tell she didn't quite believe me. I didn't blame her. At her age, who could? She had been through more than any child should have to, and now she was stuck in the middle of something she didn't understand. I had no idea who these people were or why they were after her, but I knew they weren't going to stop until they had what they wanted, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I had made a promise to her, and I wasn't going to break it. I stood up, the floor creaking beneath my boots as I moved toward the door. I needed to think. I needed a plan. We couldn't stay in the shed forever, but we couldn't just run blindly into the night either. The men would be looking for us, and I couldn't afford to make a mistake. I peered through a crack in the door, scanning the street outside. It was eerily quiet. The moonlight illuminated the empty street, but I didn't see any signs of life. I took a deep breath and turned back to the girl. Listen, I said, crouching down in front of her. I'm going to get us out of here, but I need you to trust me, okay? We're going to have to move fast and quiet. She looked at me, her eyes still filled with uncertainty, but there was a flicker of something else there too. A glimmer of hope. I could see it in the way she looked at me, like she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she would be okay. Okay, she whispered, her voice small but determined. I nodded, offering her a reassuring smile. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. Stay close to me. Don't make a sound, and don't look back, I said. She nodded, her eyes wide as she squeezed my hand. I stood up and motioned for her to follow me. We moved carefully out of the shed, sticking to the shadows as we made our way down the narrow alley. The street was still empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every step we took seemed to echo in the night, a constant reminder that we weren't safe yet. We moved quickly, but quietly, my hand holding hers tightly as we navigated the alley. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. I needed to get to a safe place, but where? The hotel had been compromised, and I didn't know anyone in town who could help. I thought about the next town over. It was a risk, but it was better than staying here where we had no options. We reached the end of the alley and paused, looking both ways before crossing the street. I could hear the faint sound of a car in the distance, but I didn't see anything yet. It was too quiet, too still. I didn't trust it. Keep moving, I whispered, pulling her along. We crossed the street and ducked into a small park, the trees offering some cover from the streetlights. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. We had to keep going. I couldn't afford to stop. We reached the far end of the park, where a row of abandoned buildings loomed in the distance. They looked deserted, but that was exactly why they might offer the cover we needed. We'll rest there, I said, pointing toward the buildings. We moved quickly, staying low to the ground as we made our way through the park. I kept my head on a swivel, constantly scanning our surroundings. We couldn't afford to be caught off guard. As we reached the buildings, I led the girl to a small door at the side of the closest one. I tested the handle, and to my surprise, it opened easily. I pushed the door open slowly, peering inside. It was dark, but I could make out the shapes of old furniture and crates scattered around the room. It looked safe enough for now. I motioned for the girl to come inside. "Stay here for a while," I said. "I'll be right back." She nodded, her eyes filled with the kind of fear only a child could feel in a situation like this. I couldn't promise her that everything would be okay, but I could promise her one thing. I wasn't going to stop fighting for her. I stepped outside, keeping a watchful eye on the street. The night was still, but I knew that wouldn't last. They were out there somewhere, and they would be looking for us. I had to stay ahead of them, but I also had to be careful. One wrong move, and everything we had fought for would be gone. I had to be smart. I had to think. And most importantly, I had to keep her safe. I stepped outside the abandoned building, my boots crunching on the gravel as I surveyed the quiet street. The girl was safe for now, tucked away inside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the calm was deceptive. The men were still out there, somewhere. I could feel them closing in, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I needed to act fast. The plan was simple enough: get her out of town and keep moving. But the execution was anything but simple. I had no idea where to go next, only that I couldn't stay here. Not with them looking for her. I turned my attention back to the street, trying to think of my next move. The city was too dangerous, too small for us to hide in for long. We needed to get out of the area and find somewhere safer. The car engine I'd heard earlier had grown louder, and I knew they were getting closer. I couldn't stay hidden forever. I had to get the girl to safety. Without another moment's hesitation, I made a decision. I would head for the old highway leading out of town, the one that curved through the hills and into the woods. It was remote, isolated, and that's exactly what we needed right now. I took a deep breath and made my way back inside. The girl was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. She looked up when she heard me enter, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're leaving," I said, my tone firm but gentle. "We can't stay here any longer. It's too dangerous." She didn't argue, just nodded. I could see the fear in her eyes, but also a spark of something else, hope. I could see that she was beginning to believe in me, and that gave me the strength I needed to keep going. I grabbed my jacket and started heading for the door, signaling for her to follow. "Stay close. Don't make a sound, and keep your head down." She nodded, silently following behind me. We slipped out of the building, moving quickly through the alley, staying in the shadows. Every footstep felt like it echoed through the night, but I kept my pace steady. I couldn't afford to slow down. We reached the street without incident, and I motioned for her to stay behind me as I checked the road for any signs of movement. The coast was clear, for now. I led her down the street, my eyes constantly scanning for any signs of danger. As we reached the edge of town, I could hear the distant rumble of a car engine, the sound of the men getting closer. My heart raced. We didn't have much time. We needed to get to the highway, but it was still a few miles away. I could see the trees in the distance, the darkness beyond them, and I knew that was our best chance. "We're almost there," I whispered to the girl, trying to reassure her. She nodded, but I could see she was exhausted, her small body struggling to keep up. "Just a little further," I said. "We'll be there soon." We kept moving, the sound of the car growing louder, but still too far to pinpoint. I kept my focus, pushing forward, until we finally reached the edge of town. The highway was just ahead, the road stretching into the darkness, leading us away from the danger. I motioned for the girl to follow me as I stepped onto the road, my eyes searching the horizon. We weren't out of danger yet, but we were close. I could feel the weight of every step pressing down on me, but I couldn't stop. Not now. We reached the first curve in the road, the last point where we could be seen from the town, and I stopped. I turned to the girl, who was looking up at me with wide, trusting eyes. "We're safe now," I said, though part of me wasn't sure I believed it. The girl nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." My heart tightened at the words. I wasn't doing this for thanks. I was doing this because she needed someone to believe in her, someone to keep her safe. I wasn't about to let her down. "We're not done yet," I said, my voice low but steady. "We've still got a long way to go, but we'll make it. I won't let anything happen to you." She nodded again, a quiet determination settling in her expression. "I trust you," she said softly. The words hit me harder than I expected, a weight settling on my chest. I had to make sure I kept that trust. I couldn't afford to fail her now. "Come on," I said, taking a deep breath and starting down the road again. Let's keep moving. The road ahead was dark, the trees casting long shadows, but there was a faint light in the distance, a beacon of hope. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed that maybe, just maybe, we would make it out of this alive. I kept walking, my boots crunching on the gravel as the girl stayed close behind me. Every step we took felt heavier, the weight of our situation pressing down on me, but I couldn't stop. We were close now, just a little further down the road, and we'd be out of the immediate danger. At least, that's what I hoped. The road was still quiet, the kind of empty that made everything feel tense, like something was about to break. My eyes kept scanning the trees and the horizon, looking for any sign of movement. I could still hear the faint hum of the car engine from before, but it had faded into the distance. That didn't mean we were safe, though. It meant they were regrouping, figuring out where we had gone. I glanced back at the girl. She was holding up, but I could see the exhaustion on her face. Her small steps were slower now, but she was still walking. That's what mattered. We're almost there, I said softly, trying to encourage her. Just a little longer. She nodded, but there was no smile, just the same fear I had seen in her eyes since we first met. The fear of the unknown. The fear of being hunted. I'm tired, she whispered. I know. I said, my voice soft, but steady. We'll rest soon. Just hang in there. I wished I could promise her that it would all be okay, but I couldn't. Not yet. I didn't even know where okay was anymore. I couldn't make her feel safe, not with the weight of the world on my shoulders. All I could do was keep her moving forward, keep her alive. The road seemed to stretch on forever, each mile feeling like it was taking longer than the last. The trees on either side of the road were tall, their branches swaying gently in the wind, casting long shadows in the moonlight. I could see the distant glow of the city behind us, but we were far enough now that it didn't feel like a danger anymore. It felt like a memory, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. Every time I heard the crunch of leaves or the snap of a twig, I froze, waiting for the sound to stop. But nothing came. Still, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. We kept walking, the silence between us growing thicker with every step. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw something ahead in the distance. A small gas station, just off the side of the road. The lights were dim, but it was enough to give us a place to stop, to catch our breath. There, I said, nodding toward the gas station. We'll rest there for a bit. The girl didn't say anything, but I could see the relief in her eyes. We moved toward the gas station, my eyes scanning the area as we approached. It was quiet, too quiet. The gas pumps were old, rusted, but there was a small convenience store attached to the building. I didn't trust it, but it was the best option we had for now. As we reached the door, I glanced around one more time, making sure no one was in sight. The coast seemed clear, but that didn't mean we were out of danger. I pushed the door open slowly, and we stepped inside. The store was empty, the shelves stocked with old cans and bags of chips. The smell of stale air mixed with the faint scent of gasoline. It was the kind of place that felt forgotten, like it had been abandoned years ago. I looked around, trying to get a feel for the place. It was small, but there were a couple of chairs in the corner. It would do for now. Sit down, I said, motioning for the girl to take a seat. She nodded and walked over to the chairs, sitting down with a sigh. She looked exhausted, and I could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. But for the first time, I saw a flicker of trust in them too. She trusted me, and I couldn't let her down. I grabbed a bottle of water from the counter, popped the cap, and handed it to her. She took it without a word, drinking deeply. I watched her for a moment, letting the silence fill the space between us. I needed to keep my guard up, but it felt nice to just breathe for a second. For once, I could let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. The girl looked up at me, her eyes filled with questions she hadn't asked yet. What happens next? She asked quietly. I looked down at the floor for a moment, gathering my thoughts. We keep moving, I said finally. We get out of here, and we keep moving until they can't find us anymore. She nodded, though I could see the doubt still in her eyes. I wasn't sure what came next either. All I knew was that I couldn't stop now. I had promised her that I would protect her, and I wasn't going to break that promise. Not now. Not ever. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me as we sat in the empty gas station, the hum of the distant lights the only sound in the room. The girl was still sitting in the corner, her body curled up as if to make herself smaller, as if trying to hide from the world that had already hurt her so much. I wasn't sure how long we could stay here. The men were out there, somewhere, searching for us, and it wouldn't be long before they figured out where we had gone. They would be relentless, and the longer we stayed in one place, the more dangerous it became. I couldn't let my guard down, not even for a moment. I had to keep her safe. I glanced at the girl again, her eyes following every movement I made, her face pale with exhaustion. She was a fighter, but I could see that she was close to breaking. I couldn't blame her. What she had been through, what we had both been through, was enough to crush anyone. I stood up and walked toward the door, checking the street outside once again. The night was still, the shadows long and stretched across the road, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I peered into the dark. There was no movement, no sign of the men, but I knew better than to trust the silence. It was just a lull, a moment before everything went wrong again. I turned back to the girl. "We can't stay here long," I said, my voice low. "We need to keep moving. Do you understand?" She nodded, her small face set in determination. "I understand," she said quietly, but her voice carried a strength I hadn't heard from her before. It was a tiny spark, but it was there. I knew she was ready to fight, to keep going. That was enough. I wasn't going to let her down. "Good," I said, taking a deep breath. "We're going to head for the woods up ahead. It's the only place I know that we can hide for a while. We'll keep moving through the night and stay off the main roads." She stood up slowly, her small frame stiff from sitting too long, but she didn't hesitate. She was trusting me, and that was something I couldn't take lightly. We both knew the danger we were in, but we also knew we had no choice but to keep moving. We couldn't stop, not until we were out of their reach. I opened the door and glanced around the corner of the gas station, scanning the street for any sign of movement. There was still nothing. The silence stretched on, unnerving in its stillness. I motioned for the girl to follow me, and we stepped out onto the road. The night air was cold, sharp against my skin, and I could feel the tension in my muscles as I kept moving, staying low to the ground. The girl kept close behind me, her footsteps barely making a sound on the gravel. I kept my eyes fixed on the path ahead, the dark woods in the distance my only focus. We couldn't afford to make any noise, to give ourselves away. The more distance we put between ourselves and the town, the better. We reached the edge of the road, where the trees began, and I paused for a moment. I looked back at the girl, who was staring up at me, her face full of questions. I could see the worry in her eyes, but there was something else there too, a determination. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for her. She was stronger than I had given her credit for. "Stay close," I whispered. "And whatever happens, don't stop running. Do you hear me?" She nodded, her grip tightening on my hand. "I hear you." I gave her a small smile before turning back to the woods. We started moving again, our pace quickening as we entered the trees. The cover of the woods felt comforting, like we were hidden from the world, but I knew it wouldn't be enough for long. They would be looking for us. They would never stop. We had to keep moving, keep pushing forward. As we made our way deeper into the woods, the sounds of the town faded behind us, replaced by the crunch of leaves and twigs beneath our feet. The girl was keeping up well, though I could see the strain in her movements. She was exhausted, but she wasn't complaining. She was still holding on to the hope that maybe we could make it out of this alive. I couldn't let that hope die. Not yet. We reached a small clearing, the moonlight spilling through the trees, and I stopped. "We'll rest here for a few minutes," I said, my voice low. "We need to keep our strength up." The girl nodded and sat down on a fallen log, still looking around nervously. I sat beside her, keeping a watchful eye on the woods around us. The silence felt deafening, but I knew it was the calm before the storm. I could feel it, deep in my bones. Something was coming, and I wasn't sure we would be ready for it. I sat there in the clearing, trying to keep my breathing steady, my mind racing. The girl was beside me, still quiet, but I could see the way she was looking around, the fear still in her eyes. I hated seeing her like this, but there was nothing I could do but keep her moving. The silence of the woods felt like it was pressing in on me, the kind of stillness that only comes when something is waiting just beyond the horizon. The wind rustled the trees around us, the sound of branches creaking in the distance. My eyes kept scanning the surroundings, looking for any signs of movement, any indication that they were close. I knew they wouldn't be far behind. They never were. "We need to keep moving," I said finally, breaking the silence. The girl didn't respond right away, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She was scared, and I didn't blame her. I was scared too, but I couldn't show it. "Come on," I added, standing up and offering my hand. She hesitated for a moment longer, then took it. Her grip was tight, and I could feel the trembling in her fingers. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We're almost there. Just a little more." She nodded, and together, we started moving again, making our way deeper into the woods. The trees were thick here, and the ground was uneven, making our steps slow and cautious. The last thing I wanted was to get caught off guard. I kept glancing back, making sure she was still with me, that she was still safe. My heart raced as I tried to push the thought of the men out of my mind, but I knew it wasn't over. They were still out there, still hunting us, and it wouldn't be long before they figured out where we were. I had no idea where the road would lead us, but I knew we couldn't stop. We couldn't give them the chance to catch up. The woods seemed to stretch on forever, and I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on us. I had no plan, no clear direction, but I knew we had to keep moving. It was our only chance. We finally came to a small clearing, the moonlight breaking through the trees above us. It was quieter here, almost peaceful, but I couldn't relax. We couldn't stay here for long. I stopped for a moment, turning to the girl. She was looking up at me, her face pale and drawn, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes now. Determination. "Are we safe here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated before answering. "For now," I said, my voice low. "But not for long. We need to keep moving, just a little longer." She nodded, though I could see the doubt still lingering. I didn't have the answer she needed, but I couldn't show her that. I had to keep up the act. We kept moving through the trees, the underbrush growing thicker, making it harder to walk quietly. Every step felt like it echoed through the night. I was starting to get a bad feeling, something deep in my gut that told me we weren't alone. I stopped abruptly, holding up my hand to signal to the girl. She froze beside me, her eyes wide. I could hear it then. Footsteps. The crunch of leaves. The unmistakable sound of someone following us. My heart skipped a beat. They had found us. "Stay here," I whispered urgently, pushing the girl down behind a large tree. I crouched down, my hand resting on the hilt of the knife I had kept hidden. I had to make sure they didn't see us. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and I could hear muffled voices. My pulse was racing. I didn't know how many of them there were, but I could feel them coming closer. I kept my breath steady, trying to stay calm, trying to think. My eyes darted around the clearing, looking for a way out. I didn't want to fight them. I didn't want to get into a confrontation, especially with the girl so close, but I wasn't going to let them take her. Not without a fight. The voices grew louder, and I could see shadows moving between the trees. I held my breath, waiting for the right moment. There was no way we could stay hidden for much longer. I turned to the girl, motioning for her to stay quiet. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. She knew what was happening. I could see her trying to keep her breathing steady, just like me. We both knew we had to make it out of here, but I wasn't sure how much longer we could keep running. We couldn't keep hiding forever. The shadows grew closer, and I knew it was time to act. I glanced over at the girl one last time, giving her a silent nod. I wasn't going to let them take her. Not now. Not ever. The men were getting closer now. I could hear their footsteps, the sound of them moving through the woods, the crunch of leaves underfoot. They were searching for us, getting closer with every passing second. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging through my veins as I watched the shadows moving between the trees. I motioned for the girl to stay low, to stay quiet, and I crouched beside her, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The woods had never felt so ominous. We were outnumbered, trapped between the trees with nowhere to run. But I wasn't going to let them take her. I wasn't going to let her down. I could feel the weight of the knife in my hand, the cold steel a small comfort as I gripped it tightly, preparing for what was to come. We had to survive this. We had to get out. The voices were growing louder, the men searching the area, and I knew that in just moments, they would spot us. I glanced at the girl, her eyes wide with fear, but she was holding herself together. I could see the strength in her, the courage she didn't even know she had. She wasn't going to give up, and neither was I. I could hear the men coming closer. I didn't know how many there were, but I could hear at least 3 voices now, their words muffled by the distance but still clear enough to make out. They were getting too close for comfort. I looked around, searching for an escape. There was nothing. The clearing was too open, too exposed. We couldn't run without being seen. But there was one option. A small ridge to our left, just beyond the trees. If we could get to it, we could make our way up the hill and out of sight. It was our only chance. I turned to the girl. "Stay close," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "We're going to make a run for it. Just follow me, and don't stop." She nodded, her face pale but determined. We didn't have much time. I stood up slowly, my eyes locked on the ridge, calculating the distance. It wasn't far, but every step we took could put us in the open. I had to be careful. I motioned for the girl to follow, my hand on her arm as I guided her toward the trees. We moved quickly, staying low, barely making a sound as we moved through the underbrush. The voices were closer now, so close I could hear their breathing, their footsteps just a few yards away. I could feel the tension in the air, the moment before everything changed. My heart raced. We had to make it. I reached the ridge first, pulling the girl up beside me, and we both crouched down, our bodies hidden in the shadow of the trees. I dared a glance over my shoulder. The men were just a few feet away, moving in our direction. My hand tightened around the knife. We had to wait, to be patient, to give them just a little more time to get closer. They were almost upon us now, their voices growing clearer as they called out to each other. I could hear them talking about checking the area, about finding us. They were getting closer. The sound of their footsteps was deafening. In the stillness of the woods, I waited for the perfect moment. Then, I made my move. I stood up quickly, pulling the girl to her feet and pushing her toward the path that led up the hill. "Run!" I shouted, the urgency in my voice carrying through the air. The girl didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward, her feet barely touching the ground as she ran up the hill. I followed close behind, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the men behind us now, their footsteps loud, crashing through the woods as they chased us. But we were faster. We were determined. We reached the top of the hill and paused for a moment, looking back down at the men who had been chasing us. They were still in the clearing, their eyes scanning the woods, but they hadn't seen us yet. We were hidden, for now. I turned to the girl, breathless, my heart still racing. "We did it," I said, my voice hoarse. "We're safe for now." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with relief, but there was still fear in them. She wasn't sure we were safe yet. And she was right. We weren't. The men wouldn't give up. But we had one thing they didn't have: hope. And as long as we had that, we had a chance. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. We had to keep moving. We had to stay ahead of them. I looked back down at the clearing one last time before turning toward the path that led deeper into the woods. "Come on," I said, taking the first step into the darkness. "We're not done yet. Let's go." The girl nodded, and together, we disappeared into the night, the world of danger and fear fading behind us as we moved forward, one step at a time. In this thrilling tale of survival and determination, the true essence of Hell Angel's stories is captured as a biker embarks on a mission to protect an innocent girl from ruthless pursuers. As the story unfolds, the biker is forced to confront his past and the harsh world he has lived in, all while trying to keep the girl safe from those who will stop at nothing to get what they want. The tension builds with every step they take, each new obstacle heightening the stakes. The fight for survival in this world of danger and betrayal is the heart of Hell Angel's stories. As the biker and the girl navigate through dark, desolate landscapes, their bond grows stronger, and the girl's trust in him becomes their only lifeline. With the odds stacked against them, this story of resilience and bravery shows the true meaning of protection. Every twist and turn in this journey mirrors the tough choices and sacrifices that are often present in Hell Angel's stories. No matter how bleak the situation seems, the hope of escape remains, and the biker's resolve never wavers. As they continue to evade the dangers closing in on them, the story drives home the core themes of loyalty and survival that define Hell Angel's stories. This gripping narrative is not just a fight for survival. It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds.